This is Jeff Scott of Blackhawk Technical College. I'll be lecturing right now on Chapter 16 of our Muroc text, Muroc's ASP.NET 4.5 Web Programming with C# 2012 for the 152.161 ASP.NET class. We've gone over the first 13 chapters as a class. I've done lectures on chapters 14 and 15 this week. They're out there on the system. And now I'm going to be doing a lecture on Chapter 16. So if you are following along, I'm on page 521. In this chapter, as you can see right here, we learn how to use the list view and data pager controls. The list view is a lot like the grid view control, but it provides additional functionality that's not available in the grid view control. All right. And as it mentions there, you can also use the data pager in conjunction with the list view to implement paging. All right. So as I have been doing, I'm just going to be turning to here and then going over the text, so to speak, that's on the facing page. So the list control is a customizable control that's been around for a while. The first table that you see here shows an example of the list view, and it shows how it can be used to update, in this case, data in the categories table of the Halloween database. Alright, it presents the data in row and column format similar to a grid view. In this table you see some of the basic attributes of the list view control, those being delete, edit, alright, and then with a current record also insert and clear. To define the layout for a list view control, you use templates, as shown here in the bottom table on page 523. At a minimum, the list view control will typically contain a layout template and an item template. The layout template defines the overall layout of the control, and the item template defines the layout used for each item that you're going to be binding to in the data source. How to configure a control, just so you see this, they're going to talk about it now on page 525 and 524. But this is the program, the one program for this chapter. Alright, so there's the control. So notice, very similar to information we've seen before. It's totally textual, but for example, for the Austin powers, there's the category. It belongs in the short and long descriptions, the price, and the on hand. This might be a really nice kind of thing if you were going to create a report for a manager who was concerned more or less with how many were on hand. Now, this probably would have really been important to a manager a week ago, a week before Halloween, as opposed to the week after. But as Halloween ends, and if this place is going to start stocking up again, they need to know what's sold, what hasn't sold, etc. So what you see right here, again, is an example of the configuration for the list view dialog box. The easiest way to configure it is through this dialog box, but first you have to add the list view control to the page and then bind it to a data source. When you use this, Visual Studio generates templates for you based on whatever options that you choose over here. Alright, the item template that's generated depends on the columns in the data source that the control is bound to and whether or not you allow for editing and deleting to take place. If you select the Enable Paging option, the data pager control will automatically be added also. Alright, as you select options here, the preview basically in here is going to change to show you what's available. As far as working with the template, alright, as you can see here, that some of the code that's shown on page 527, this is the layout template that was generated with the list view control. The control was configured using the options shown previously, except no formatting was applied. So you can basically, as the author says there, by showing you like this, you're able to concentrate just on the code involved and not be concerned with the aesthetics. To start with, the template contains a table with two rows, as you can see here and here. The first row contains a single column that contains yet another table. The ID attribute of the table is set to item placeholder container, indicating that the table will contain a placeholder. Although that's not required, it's included by default when you configure a list view control using the dialog box that we looked at previously. So the first row here defines the table headers that are displayed across the top of the list view control, and the second view identifies where the data from the data source should be displayed. Hopefully you notice that each element within this template has a run attribute equals server. Again, as we've talked about in earlier classes, this is necessary for the table and TR elements that specify an ID attribute, since only server controls can contain this. Although the run attribute may not be required for other elements, it's added by default, and it's probably a good idea to use it when in doubt, at least. Alright, on 529, we see the item template for the list view control at the beginning of the chapter. The first thing, hopefully, that you notice here is that the template contains a single table row element. This is necessary because this table row element defines the item placeholder. The element that defines the item placeholder is the TR element. At runtime, this TR element in the item template is substituted for the TR element in the layout element. By default, the item template control with a grid layout contains one column for each column in the data source. In addition to the item template, an alternating item template is generated when you configure it, so it looks a little bit nicer. Again, if we go back and we look at this, you'll notice that every other row has got a darker color to it. And a lot of times you see that known as zebra striping, and it goes by a lot of different names. But you can see how that's set up here in the code. Okay. As far as sorting, this looks very similar to the stuff that we saw before when we were working with the grid view control. Alright, but to do it here, you add a button to the layout template for each column that you want to sort by. To indicate that a button should be used for sorting, you set it to sort. In here, you notice that we haven't set it, we haven't done that, I believe, because we're sorting it by hyperlink. Alright, this is almost identical, if it's not identical, to what we saw earlier. So the ideas are the same, we're just using a different control to do it. Like the grid view control, the list view control itself doesn't do any sorting itself directly. Rather, it depends on the underlying data source to do the sorting for you. Alright. Alright, lost my page. Sorry about that. Here we go. As far as providing for paging, here on pages 532 and 533, again, you use the data pager control, and as we talked about earlier, in an earlier slide, that if you've got that checked to enable paging, this control will be given, provided for you automatically. All right. Again, when you select the enable paging option from the configure list view dialog box. All right. When you do that, it becomes available and lets you choose whether you want to use the next previous type of thing, as shown right here, or if you want to use something with numbers, as shown right here. You can see the difference between these: next previous pager field and numeric pager field. All right. There's also ways that you can customize paging, and they talk about these here on page 535. To do this, you use the attributes of the data pager control and the next previous pager field and numeric pager field controls. Because the data pager is a separate control, you don't have to place it inside of a list view. Rather, you can place it anywhere you want on the page. The data pager control can be used only with controls that implement the pageable item container interface. Currently, the list view control is the only control that meets that criterion, but that may change in the future. The attributes shown for the next previous pager, the one right here, determine the type of buttons that are used in the pager and which buttons are displayed. All right, and you can see that when depending on what you choose, again, the code will basically be set up for you automatically. So in this example, we're combining the numeric pager along with the first and the last from the first, previous, next, and last buttons. It is possible to group list view control, and they show this here on pages 536 and 537. Mention here that another feature is the ability to group data so it's displayed in 2 or more columns. Alright, in this example here you can see we've got the product data grouped into 2 columns. The easiest way to create a control like this, as mentioned, is to select the tile layout from the configure list view dialog box. when you use this, the layout template includes a nested table, just like with a grid layout. The row in there defines the placeholder for the items in the group. So if we want this, we've got to do something like this. Okay? And to determine the number of columns in the group, you set the group item count attribute in the list view control. All right? So the rest of the chapter, starting on pages 538 and 539 and going for what? 2, 4, 6, 8, the last 10 pages or so of the chapter show the product list application that I've already shown you on here. All right, so we'll take another quick look at it, revisit it, look a little bit at the ASPX code and at the C# code. Okay, so the author says here, now that you've learned the basic skills, the following topics present the designing code for an app that uses this control to display a list of products. So what you see on the screen right here or back here, again it's the same thing, all right, is the product list application. The first column in the list view contains the product name for each row. The second column contains the headings. All right, so that's the product name, there's the headings, and there's the values for each one of the fields. All right, this type of layout would be probably impossible and at least inconceivable almost without using the list view type of control. Again, you can notice that it uses item and alternating item templates to display each row in a different background, every other row in a different background color. And again, the data pager control is used in this to display only 4 products per page. So you'll notice if we come to here, we've got Austin Powers, etc., but we can't go forward. Once we go forward, we can now go backwards. All right, we can go to the end, we can jump back to the beginning, etc. All right, as far as the ASPX file shown here on page 541, to generate the starting code, the author selected the flow layout from the Configure List View dialog box. Unlike the code that's generated with a grid layout, the code for the flow layout doesn't use tables. That makes it easy to apply styles using CSS, which is kind of what they started to do here. And again, this code is on 541, 542, and 543. So the first page of the listing here shows the layout template for the list view control. The 2 divisions were generated by default. The first is used as the container for the item placeholder. The second division uses a data pager control used by the list view control. The only other change the author mentions that was made here was to add a paragraph before the 2 divisions, which contains literal text that's displayed at the top of the list view control. On the next page here, on page 542 in your text rather, this page shows the listing for the item template control. The author made considerable changes to the ASPX that was generated by the template. It says, to understand how this code works, you need to realize that the paragraph element that displays the name of the product is floated to the left. Similarly, the paragraph element that defines each of the remaining product columns is floated to the left. Finally, the third page that you see on the next page here, on page 543, shows the listing of the alternating item template. The code is identical to the code for the item template, except that the author gave a main division for the ID attribute. Okay. Again, hopefully this goes without saying. I realize that these lectures are somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes long, typically each, so they're not lengthy. I'm just going over the stuff for completeness sake. So by the end of this, and hopefully I'm going to do chapter 17 also today, but after we do this, we now either directly in class, we went through chapters 1 through 13. You had homework on chapters 1 through 11. In addition, I did lectures on chapters 14, 15, 16, and 17, or I will have. We'll go over chapter 24 of the book, and then we'll do an ASP.NET MVC or Model View Controller project also. All right. So turning up to page 545, the author mentions to update list view data, you use edit item and insert templates. First, the author wants to describe the various buttons that can be used to work with data in a list view control, and you can see them right here at the top of page 545. As the author says here, you may recall that when you use a form view control or a details view control with templates The templates include buttons that let you insert, update, and delete data. So if you look right here, these are the things that are available to you, but there's not a hell of a lot of work to get these to work. As far as working with the edit item template, so they talk about edit item and insert here on pages 546 and 547. So the figure presents the templates for the list view control that was shown back in figure 16.1 that was used to maintain the data in the categories table of the Halloween database. Hopefully you'll notice if you take a look at the edit item template that it contains two buttons whose command names are set to update and cancel. The insert item template is similar. Instead of update and cancel buttons, it has insert and cancel buttons. Sorry. Just finished doing some other taping. So, all right. As far as raising events used by the list view control, the list view control raises many of the same events that the details view and form view controls raised. For instance, item updating, item updated, all right, item deleting, item deleted, and the stuff that we talked about before pretty much holds true for this also. So in the chapter, and that's it, we just looked a little bit at the list view control, and you saw that when you use the list view control and you enable paging, you automatically get the data pager control added. And as of right now, the data pager is, the list view control is the only control that allows you to, quote, use, unquote, the data pager control, although that may change in the future. All right, so I'm going to come back with the next lecture in just a minute, the last one in this series at least, Chapter 17, How to Use Object Data Sources with ADO.NET. So I'll be back with that shortly.